Greetings. My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks, Senior, your host, and this is Community Forum. We have an exciting program today. We have 4 illustrious people here from Lake County. And to my extreme left is Kevin O'Connor with O'Connor Law Firm Limited. And to his right is Lord Preacher Howard, Lake County activist. And to my immediate right is Denise Rothheimer. She's a guest lecturer. She's she's an author, and she works with mothers on a mission to stop violence. And our anchor man, of course, is Ralph Peterson Jr. He's a Lake County activist. Greetings, folks.
Greetings. Hello, sir.
We're very happy that each one of you taking time for your busy schedule, and literally your busy schedule, to be with us on Community Forum. And we have, we're going to talk about, we have open discussion, and we have topics that never grow old. And the primary topic is equal protection under the law. And Denise, I would like to start off with you. You're the first timer on our program, and not just because ladies first, because you're an exemplary person, and we like for Lake County to hear, first of all, a little bit about your personal and professional background. Who is Denise Rothheimer?
To go with the personal, I'm a mother. I have a daughter named Jasmine, to whom the law we passed, which I authored, Jasmine's Law, was named. She was raped at the age of 11, and in 2003 we concluded with the criminal justice process with the conviction. And it was after that experience I learned that victims of violent crime have no rights, no say, no justice. And so I decided to change that, and in my effort to change laws, I founded the organization Mothers on a Mission to Stop Violence. And after we did pass Jasmine's Law, which double sentencing for child sex offenders who commit an act of sexual violence against minors while the minor is under the influence of alcohol. Prior to Jasmine's Law, alcohol was specifically excluded as an intoxicant. Therefore, it was not an aggravating factor. But alcohol renders children incapacitated in the same manner as drugs. So we also passed victims' rights sign-off sheet. I went through the system without ever learning that we even had what's called victims' rights. So at the onset of the criminal justice process, law enforcement officers are now required to provide victims with information and an explanation of their rights, as well as compensation available to them that is not from taxpayer dollars, to recover out-of-pocket expenses relating to the criminal offense. That was actually sponsored by your very own State Representative Rita Mayfield. Both the laws passed unanimously. It took 10 years. In the meantime, I started helping and assisting others who have become victims of the system. John Birch torture victims. I also tried to match them with the Torture Inquiry Relief Commission so that those who were incarcerated on claims of innocence would be able to have legal representation, because that's a huge issue for many of us on either side, legal representation. This morning I actually had court in federal court for my brother, who was unlawfully arrested and maliciously prosecuted here in our very own Lake County.
Wow.
And we've been through the court now for about 3 years, which I've been carrying on my shoulders. I'm not an attorney, but I do all the writing of all the paperwork for him, the pleadings. And so today the judge did continue it, which is a good thing, because I was expecting it to be dismissed. The state's attorney's office filed a motion to dismiss our complaint, our third amended complaint. But the judge gave my brother the opportunity to file a response. So I now have 30 more days to hopefully try and find an attorney. So that's basically who I am, personally, professionally. All my work is out of pocket. I'm not a 501c3, never was. I'm there to help and assist in any way possible to prevent people from becoming victims of the system on either side.
Denise, you mentioned that you had support from Rita Mayfield, our 6th District State Representative. Did you have support from other mothers? How much support did you get?
Well, with the Survivor Rights Act is initially the bill that I had her, because this was the second law. Jasmine's law had already passed.
Okay.
I went back out into the community. What I do is I go door to door.
Okay.
I knock on neighbors' doors. I raise awareness. I say, here's the problem. Here's the solution that I've come up with. This is a bill that I've authored. Will you support it? I need you as a constituent, someone in this voting district, to sign your name so that I could go to the legislator and say, hey, your constituent wants this. So I collected over 1,000 petitions and got media attention, created my own TV show, got as much, raised as much awareness as possible, held forums, et cetera, et cetera. So everybody and anybody I could reach, I got support from.
Well, we're very happy to that you have been willing to be on Community Forum to talk about it.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure being here.
Hopefully we get... Kevin, tell us, first of all, the Lake Counties may not know who you are. I think they've probably seen you in North Chicago quite a bit with the law firm in Chicago, though, right?
Yes, Kevin O'Connor. I have my own firm, the O'Connor Law Firm. I've been practicing for over 21 years. I do a multiple of personal injury related matters. I do civil rights as well. I've handled a number of victims of civil rights where police abuses have caused people to be either beaten, killed, maimed. Unfortunately, it happens a lot up here in Lake County, more than some of the other counties, at least in the last few years. I've had over 12 people just from North Chicago alone, and obviously the Hanna family being the most significant that people have heard about, where Darren Hanna was killed at the hands of 6 police officers who beat him to death when he was unarmed. So it's a real problem up here, and to hear your guest who talks about being on both sides of really both sides of the fence. She's for victims' rights as well as the accused rights. It's a rare person to have. What people don't realize is that police officer abuse hurts everybody. It hurts the person accused and it hurts the victims, because our laws are designed to protect people from police abuse so that not one innocent person is supposed to go to jail. So if there's a police technicality that they violate your rights, you're supposed to be let free, because there's a threat that you could be put in jail when you're innocent. They force a confession, they beat it out of you, whatever that is. Well, then the victim as well is being abused, again, by the police who've abused this person, because now they're not getting their day in court. They're losing their rights. They're standing up saying, why are you letting this person who committed this crime on me go? And the answer is because the police officer abused their power and didn't act appropriately. So what people don't realize is they think, well, I'm not going to encounter the police, so therefore I don't have to worry about police abuse because I don't get into trouble. Well, if you're a victim of a crime, you're subject to the same abuse, because now that person who came after you may be let free simply because of the actions of that police officer.
Attorney O'Connor, you mentioned that you have, was it 14 cases? And,
12 up in
cases,
North Chicago.
North Chicago. Any reason why there's more cases in North Chicago than other places? And I might piggyback on this, and there's 2 different types of cases. There's civil and there's criminal. So you want to tie that into why there's...
Sure, and that's part of why there needs to be crime victims' rights. For criminal cases, the person who decides everything in our local area here is the state's attorney. So it's the Lake County State's Attorney. They are the advocate for the people. They are to bring the case. They decide whether to bring charges, whether to bring it as a misdemeanor or felony, whether to throw it out, whether to continue to pursue it. So on the end of that is that you have victims that say, well, I want to stand up in court and tell my side of it, and the state's attorney says, sorry, we already worked a deal, show you the door. You don't get to tell the judge your side of it, so that when somebody's putting sentence, they don't really get to hear from the victim. Well, these laws have helped change that. So it's an incredible thing that's been done, and it's a great thing that's been done, because now you have a legal process to where you're not just begging and pleading to tell your side of the story. You have an actual right to do it. The civil side is different. So as a private lawyer, a lot of people come to private lawyers and say, look, help me. I want to bring criminal charges against this police officer who did this to me, and unfortunately we can't do that. So civil lawyers can only bring compensation, move into the courts, move into the federal court system to say, or in state court, but more likely in federal, to get it out of this jurisdiction and say, look, you have to compensate this person for the abuses they suffered, whether it's wrongful conviction, whether it's physical injuries they've suffered. And that's what civil lawyers do. We're not state's attorneys. We don't bring charges. We can't even promote the criminal case. We have nothing to do with it. It's really two separate arms. And so our hands are kind of tied on that end. Now, when we uncover evidence, when I get involved early, I'm happy to turn that over to the state's attorney's office or the U.S. attorney's office to have them take a look at it if there is criminal conduct, but they make that decision independently.
We talk about equal protection under the law. We have public defenders, right? We have prosecuting attorneys, and then we have private attorneys. So equal protection, a person that cannot afford a private attorney is assigned a public defender by the court.
They are, and unfortunately, no matter how hard our public defenders try, right, most of them are newer lawyers. I mean, it's just a matter of the system. The funding for them is not very high. Once they get really good at what they do, they usually move on to private practice where they can make a living and have a family, right? But on the other side of that, they may be given 200 cases. One of those cases may have been assigned to them 2 days ago, and they're up for trial for this person, whereas that private lawyer has a chance, whether it's a month, 2 months, 3 months, to study it, hire experts, fund experts to like combat what the state is bringing, because they have everything at their disposal. So is it an unfair advantage? It's a system that's not perfect. I mean, at least in our country you get representation, right, if you can't afford it. But are you getting equal representation as the private people? I don't think anybody would say you are, except in rare instances where maybe they have a light load on their docket going on.
Well, we're going to get back to you, but I want to give Ralph Pearson Jr. an opportunity. Ralph, and I think that was November 5th or 6th?
November 6th.
November 6th, 2011. That I think this was your cousin that got beat to similar cases in Money, Mississippi, Emmett Till. The mother couldn't recognize him except by certain parts of the body and so forth. But your other title, I introduced you as a community activist, but you are...
Investigator also.
Investigator. I have to remember to add that to your resume there. You
All
know.
righty.
But tell us about, we're talking about equal protection. Did Darren Dagwood Hanna have equal protection? What was that violated? How was that violated?
Well, I would say that was violated because they were called for a supposedly domestic dispute, and instead of going in finding out what was going on, they pretty much just kicked the door down and attacked them and literally beat them to death. So that's pretty much how that went, you know. So
well,
I don't.
You've been expressing this to the city council for 3 years now, you know, a little over 3 years now, right? Because it happened November 6th, and he passed away November 11th.
Correct.
Right? So you've been expressing, as a matter of fact, you got good information, legal information, you presented it, but I understand it was another attorney, another person, they paid $30,000 to do what you did for free.
Right, and he found nothing. I mean, matter of fact, the tapes of the 911 tapes, he didn't find those, and there was a host of information that the person who, like you say, they paid all the money to, he really didn't find anything. I uncovered most of it.
Well, I have to admire you for the work that you did. Now, the mother car, was coming to the council every week, and she stated that all she wanted was justice. Now, that's not too much to ask for, right?
No, not at all.
She asked for justice. And, well, why isn't she getting justice? You'll make a comment on that.
Well, there's a host of reasons. I mean, the mayor pretty much would not act. At the time, the sitting chief of police, which was Newsom at the time, no one would act. The system really totally just failed. No one would react, including the state's attorney at the time, Waller. He made a judgment saying that it was justified without even having all the evidence, and that would be the evidence, a lot of the evidence that I uncovered. So the whole system just failed. That's one reason why I say why Mrs. Carr says she wants justice, because...
You mentioned state's attorney. What about the coroner at that time? What's the coroner?
Well, he's a part of it also. He made the statement that...
undetermined.
What was the word? Yeah, undetermined. And which we found out that normally when the coroner rules undetermined, it's for infants, SIDS death or something like that. Very seldom when it comes to someone grown do they use undetermined. So like I say, the whole system failed, from the coroner, state's attorney, chief of police, the mayor. No one would act.
But the new coroner overturned it, at least.
That's the next thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. So go ahead, follow through with that. The new coroner was, I think God is in the plan there.
Yeah,
so this coroner was defeated, the new coroner, and a new coroner stated...
Dr. Rudd.
Dr. Rudd, okay, yeah.
He came forward, and he
was a pathologist.
He was. So he's an actual doctor, as opposed to the previous coroner who was not. So he had the opportunity to review the evidence, and we had an independent person as well look at that evidence, and they basically found the same thing. They both found that it was a homicide. This was an intentional act, and he died at the hands of the officers, as opposed to, something that is undetermined why he died, that he choked on something. It didn't quite happen that way.
Well, I want to move further with that. Since it was declared, determined it was a homicide, why wasn't it proceeded to be prosecuted as a homicide?
I wish we had the state's attorney here to answer that question, right? That's part of the answer. So
seriously,
it all depends on, it's a difficult problem for the state's attorney in Lake County. If you're going to prosecute 6 officers from North Chicago out of what 50-some officers they have, there's a lot of criminal cases that come through that Lake County system where the right-hand people of the state's attorney is the police officer, right? That's their star witness coming in on every crime, right? I investigated, here's what I found. I'm a credible person, and based on because the accused is denying that what happened, and the officer says, no, I'm an officer, I have a badge, I'm telling the truth, and therefore they take the word of the officer over the accused in most instances, unless you can disprove it, right? I mean, people say that you're presumed innocent. You're probably not presumed innocent as soon as that officer gets up and says, that person said they did this, or I investigated and they did this. You're not presumed anymore. Your presumption is lost. So if the state's attorney is going to charge 6 officers who may have been people that previously arrested people, put them in jail for murder, now you're going to have the victims of all those crimes screaming bloody murder when they're asking for a new trial, because these officers lack credibility. They're criminals, if they're found guilty, and they're going to ask for a new trial in every one of those cases. Now what happens to the state's attorney's docket? What happens to their winning record of an over 90% guilty rate? I think it's even higher than that in Lake County. What happens to their statistics when all of a sudden things start getting overturned? That's not good for politics. It's not good for a lot of reasons.
Well, this is open discussion. And Preacher, I want to get to you, but I have to have one question I have to ask Janice. Your scope of your work is with victims and survivors, We talked about victims. Now, what about, well, survivors too, I guess, right? Survivors.
Yeah, survivors are, you know, when we become a victim of a crime, we're not always a victim.
Okay.
You know,
right.
you could survive a crime, or in Ralph Peterson's case, he's a survivor. He lost his cousin.
Okay.
So, as well as Mother Carr, as you mentioned, she's a survivor.
Okay, okay. And things are just not progressing, and we're going to continue with that too, are not progressing the way they are when all the evidence is there. Why do you think it's not moving the way it should move when all the evidence is there?
Well, I can tell you this, and what got me on my mission in activism, I had evidence of the second victim. My daughter wasn't the only individual who was violated that day by that perpetrator. When I learned that the prosecutor, when we met, she asked me if I believed in second chances. I had my daughter with me, she was 12.
The prosecutor?
The prosecutor asked me, Miss Rothheimer, do you believe in second chances? This is why I can't register that term when I hear it. And I said to the prosecutor, I said, because I'm a woman of faith. I believe, you know, in redemption and all of that, forgiveness.
Okay.
But when she talked to me about second chances, I said, you know, my daughter's a rape victim. There are no second chances. I said, who are you talking about? She wanted me to accept a 3-year sentence, no jail, for the rapist to get therapy. Now, the detective I had met with, the one who took my daughter's statement, told me, based on Jasmine's articulate description, he could get at least 15 years. So I had that number in my head. And when the prosecutors told me 3 years, no jail, I thought to myself, I said, can I hire an attorney? And I never knew my rights.
Okay.
I was never informed. I went through the system completely ignorant. That's why I was railroaded. And that's why I do this work, so that other people don't become railroaded. Because there will come times when prosecutors want a conviction without justice. So what ultimately happened, I was silenced. And I was unable to disclose to the judge about the second victim. And even though I was able to testify as to the facts, because I objected to the plea deal, the judge did throw out the plea deal based on what I said. But the prosecutor silenced me. She just wanted a conviction without justice. That's why when we had the case like Juan Rivera, when I saw 11-year-old Holly Staker being blamed by the prosecutor to explain away the evidence, that the little girl was having consensual sex with men. How do you have consensual sex with men when you're 11? How does a prosecutor say this? Then the red flag. That's why I ended up advocating for Rivera's case. Too many red flags. And thank God, because his lawyer became my brother's lawyer when my brother was railroaded on the other side, the defendant's side. And we got that case dismissed because by then I knew the law, and you could not make a victim of us no more. And then you have Jerry Hobbs. Same thing. DNA. Oh, but the prosecutor, there were people having sex in the woods. The sperm jumped inside the little girl's cavity, 8 years old, to explain away the evidence. And when people begin to buy into this, because think about it, Jerry Hobbs sent there for, what, 5 years in jail. Speedy trial? I don't think so. Why wasn't everybody raising alarms? We have Rivera, 3 trials. That's 36 people got him guilty, found him guilty. On what evidence? That the little girl was having consensual sex? So we have to educate ourselves as a public, as a society, because if you do get called in for jury duty, you may not be a victim of violent crime, you may not be charged with the crime, but what if you're called as a juror? Do you really want to risk putting yourself through a trial, not being able to detect red flags, and then put an innocent man or woman in prison, potentially for the rest of their life? We it's an obligation, it's a duty that we have, so we must educate ourselves. But we've got to watch out for these convictions without justice.
Just know, though, if you're a victim of a crime or you're someone who's been accused of a crime, you'll never get picked for that criminal jury anyway. They'll find a way to get you bumped off that jury. So when you say, you know, you've got to educate the people, you're absolutely right, because you've got to educate the people that haven't been a victim of the crime, because as soon as they disclose that, you know, people can eliminate 5 jurors for no reason. You know, you can get just bumped right off. And then there's for cause. If you can show somebody's biased or prejudiced, it wouldn't be too hard for me in about 20 seconds to ask her 5 questions that would show that she's biased or prejudiced toward a certain side or another because of what she's gone through. And I would thank her, and the judge would kindly excuse her without me ever using any cause. She would be excused for cause because she has an axe to grind or a feeling that she's gone through that says the system isn't working. So.
And can I add, and I know Preacher Howard, maybe you can jump in, but there is also one element we're missing from this whole equation. And I think that is the ingredient that makes up the recipe for convictions without justice. That's absolute immunity. When you have a doctrine that allows prosecutors who have the power of indictment to go unpunished for withholding exculpatory evidence, which is evidence that can prove the defendant's innocence, when they extract false testimony, that is perjury. So when they can build a case on lies, fraud, and deception and not be culpable, you want to talk about the chaos and dysfunction. That is why the system is broken. They have absolute immunity, and that's what I'm fighting in federal court.
And people have to understand what immunity means. You've been educated, but immunity basically comes from England, that says the king can do no wrong. So you can't prosecute the king, you can't bring him up on charges, you can't charge them criminally, you can't do anything. So that immunity has passed down to prosecutors from the Old English law that says the king can do no wrong. So they're the king of the courtroom. They can do no wrong even if they do wrong, and that's what she's bringing out. So
okay, we're going to pause. And Preacher, I have to apologize to you, you know, and in the old country of Africa, the head of the household is highly respected. As a matter of fact, we have to get permission from the elder before to speak. And here I've you know, allowed you to be last. You should have been first, you know. But you have you're 87 years old.
Correct.
And you have a lot of you know, been through a lot of enthusiasm. You still have, and I want you to tell us how you have been suffered through where we say citizens punishment, but and how you have overcome, I should say.
Well, going back to my grandfather, who was a slave, he had very little education, but he said the word justice is a tricky word. The word justice means just us, not them. If you're not well connected in community or whatever the setting is, you don't get justice. And if you're well connected, regardless of what you do or don't do, you get just us. It means just us get the benefits of these. Most of I'm a firm believer that over 60% of the men who are incarcerated in jail is innocent, and 80% of the people in the street are guilty. It's just those who are in jail do not have the money to get a lawyer like Kevin, who could create justice for them. They got justice because they were just that group and they couldn't afford the best attorney, and that's how. And plea bargain, as Mr. Denise has said, a lot of that's the way of justice being served to those who are well connected, and so that system has got to be changed. It's got to be changed.
How serious is plea bargaining? What is the negative effect of plea bargaining?
Well, plea bargaining, the negative effect is that a person could be innocent and have stayed in jail 6 months waiting trial because you couldn't afford to put up a bond. And if you've been in jail 6 months and they say, well, okay, you plead guilty to this charge and we'll let you out on time served, so you've been there 6 months, you done lost your job, lost your car, lost your wife or girlfriend, and so you're glad to get out of there. So a lot of time, a lot of young men will just plead guilty to whatever charges they throw up there to get out of jail on what he was being held for. And that's the bad part about that plea bargain, because and then it's the other side of it. If someone they want to protect, they can give them a deal with no jail time, as Mr. Denise just mentioned. They often, the man should have got 15 years, but they gave him 3 years probation.
7.5 ultimately is what he was sentenced. Yeah.
But those, if you could well connect it, just us will get that deal, and just them will get that deal. So it's all depends on what side of the fence you're on, how you look at it. But I would like to see a system where fairness is across the board. If a person is found guilty, everybody get the same punishment, or everybody get probation, and that's the one way of clearing up the system.
Dr. Brooks, it's even worse than that. So here's what I've noticed, and this is what actually has happened in some of the North Chicago victims. So they get beaten up by the police officers, but the police officers who've done this to enough people know, so they now charge them with resisting arrest, battery on a police officer. I saw that an officer had scrapes on their knuckles from hitting the person, and they charged them with battery on a police officer because they got injured, okay? And that's a felony. So they go in, and they say, they get a public defender who looks at the charges and says, wow, you got battery on a police officer, you got resisting arrest, you got all these other charges besides the general ones. They're willing to knock it down to a minor misdemeanor. You plead to the resisting. They'll drop battery on a police officer, which you could get 5 years in jail for, and a felony record. You'll never vote. You'll never get a job. You better take the misdemeanor and go, because if you don't, they said they're going to prosecute it to the fullest, and it's your word against the officer because there's no witness. Now that's the reality of what's happening. All these people say, give me the pen. They can't sign fast enough because it's their word against an officer, and nobody believed them. They went in, first thing they did, they got in front of a judge on a preliminary hearing. They're all bloodied or beaten up and says, Judge, the officer beat me, forced me into confession. I don't want to hear it. Move on. Next case. You've been charged with battery. You're lucky you got what you got, right? So that's the problem. And once you have that bad apple that's there, that's saying, well, they hit me first, or took a swing at me, or they were reaching for something, and that's why I hit him, or he hit me, and that scrape on my knuckles is because he hit my hand first, or whatever they're trying to say. If somebody doesn't uncover that evidence to cry foul, it gets really bad. I mean, and people, once they have a conviction, this is the hard part about North Chicago. It's the vicious cycle into our community. If you walk around with a felony conviction that they gave you because you did time served, now you don't have an opportunity to get a job. Now you don't have an opportunity to work, to have employment, to do anything. And now you're out on the street. What's your option? You're going to turn to drugs, drink, something else, and you really had no other way to make a living. And then they ask, well, why is the community going down when we just have a series of people that keep getting convicted for things they didn't even know what they were signing?
Can we talk about recidivism? Did you ever work on the recidivism?
Yes.
Board? Tell us about that. That's another one way. If a person gets out of prison, out of jail, he's told there's certain areas that he cannot go into. He cannot go in, like in the projects or well, that's where his family's at, right? But if he goes there, then he's picked up, and then he has to serve his sentence. But where else is he going? You
mean if he has a sex registration?
Well, I mean, is this a victim?
Just
Any victim just getting out of jail, and he get on probation. Probation was, I guess I was thinking about, and he's not allowed to go back into the residence of where he came from. But where's he going? And he gets go back there, then he gets picked up, and he goes.
Well, actually,
revolving door.
That is a real life situation. It was my cousin who raped my daughter.
Okay.
So when he was paroled after serving 6 of the 7.5 years, because on a Class X it's 85%.
Okay.
Because of his conviction, he couldn't be around children. So an aunt took him in. And I remember going into a meltdown. Like, why would she do that? And it turned out that he violated his parole by watching pornography on their computer. So he ended up going back. Anyway, it's really, if for the Recidivism Coalition to Reduce Recidivism, the mission is no more victims.
Yeah.
That's why I subscribed. That's why I participated. That's why I got involved. Because I don't want people to become victims of these violent crimes, because these are lifelong traumas, like a war veteran, PTSD.
Okay.
You know, we have triggers that are very similar to veterans. They can come back like that and put us in a state that can, you know, drag us down. So where I sit as the mother, I really don't care where he goes. That's not my problem. My problem is making sure my child reaches her potential, that she's able to overcome the grief, the loss, the horrific nightmares, the victimization, so that she can reach her potential. And she has. She actually graduated from Cambridge University Law School in England.
Congratulations.
So she's very accomplished. That's my goal. And for those who are coming into the community from the prisons, my prayer is that no matter what your circumstance, don't let that be an excuse to justify an action to victimize another individual, because there is no justification. There's none. Whether you can earn a living, whether you have a place to live, I know if I'm homeless, I know if I'm unemployed, I know I'm not going to commit crime, and I can say that because I have been both. I'm a single mom, never married. I was teenage mom when I got pregnant. I've overcome those challenges. So I don't subscribe to the, you know, I couldn't find a place to live, or I couldn't find a job.
Okay.
Well, you can do something. God enables all of us, and when you have the power of faith, you live in the abundance, and things will happen, and you will prevail. Because only you can keep yourself down. So I fully support programs that provide those coming into the community with these violent backgrounds. And I had, do you know Gregory Jones? He's Patricia Jones?
Yes.
Yes, well,
very,
he
very
conducts this group with ex-offenders. And my daughter and I sat in the group, and there were people who had 14-year sentences in this group. And we welcomed them as if they were anyone else. We treated them fairly and with respect, and were open to conversation. And I really appreciated being able to share our experiences and hear from theirs, so that we can come together with the same understanding. And I will tell you, people who have criminal backgrounds, they are not supportive of the rape of children. In fact, I find those individuals fully supportive of efforts that I pursue to prevent child sexual violence, especially child sexual violence. And that's why the Coalition to Reduce Recidivism did support that legislation, even though I did not have the support of the victim advocate groups.
Well, okay, please.
The case you were talking about, that gentleman spent 15 or 20 years in jail. He never should have gone. He was innocent. He was framed and sent to jail. And he spent about 20 years down there in jail for something he did do. Now there's bills up for the vote by the public if possession of drugs or crimes that were non-violent crime, they want to purge their record of that and reduce them back to a misdemeanor. Now that means their record, Kevin, I'll ask you this question, would that mean that their record will be clear of that charge? Is that
Well, it all depends. If you're reducing it to a misdemeanor, you're not clearing it of the charge, but you're relieving them of the problem of having a felony conviction, which eliminates any federal job or any city or county job, because if you have a felony conviction, I mean, one of the things that I was shocked to find out in North Chicago is that you could have a misdemeanor conviction and still be a police officer. So, you know, one of the criteria was you couldn't have a felony on your background, but you could have a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting, I found that even shocking, but you know what? So if it's reduced down to that, you could even become a police officer in North Chicago. So the jobs will open up if something like that happens.
Well, Chicago is boy, it's something different. North Chicago is something different. We're wondering, Ralph, why there's so much apathy in the city of North Chicago. But you have, I guess you could spend a whole program, you know, talking about that, right? You've spent about policemen being fired, fail a test, and the mayor still put him on the force when you got a police and fire board supposed to perform that function. But did you ever find out why the mayor and I have to blame the city council. The city council allowed this to happen, right? But the mayor just put the fired policeman back on the force.
Well, that's one reason why there's a bunch of apathy, because people kind of feel like regardless what I say or do, they're going to lose. You know, I mean, because like you just said, the mayor does what he wants to do. He doesn't follow any kind of rules or regulation. Like you say, officer can get in trouble. Instead of disciplining them, you know, all the disciplinary action is set aside. The officer is even promoted in a lot of the cases. So the citizens feel that regardless if they stand up or whatever, you know, I mean, things are going to keep going the way
Well,
it's
one
been.
thing, Ralph, there was a election. All this was brought before the citizens on another TV program, but and the people watched TV, knew the situation in North Chicago, but they re-elected the mayor. Now, how does that happen? You know, when they know, you know, there's injustice, you know, from the top, and you still gonna re-elect him?
Well, I think I gave an example on that last time. I was saying about an elephant being chained to a tree for 5 years. Then when you finally cut the chain, it will not wander beyond, if the chain was 5 feet, it will not wander beyond 5 feet. And that's pretty much what's happening in North Chicago. They just don't feel that things could change, because what's happening there has always been happening. So they don't really think that things can change, so they just give up. They've pretty much thrown the hat in, you know, they don't care.
Well, what do you think about that, preacher?
Reverend Lightfoot was a minister, a local minister here, and he used to, was very active. He said people can be best put into 3 categories. There are people who make things happen. They are the Ralph Petersons of the community. There are people who wait for things to happen. They are the followers. And there's another group of people, after something happened and took place, they still don't know what went on. And as long as you keep that third group isolated from the second and first group, you can control the people, keep them without any knowledge or information. And that I often point out that issues that's very dear to our community, we support the issue, but we'll vote for the person who's against the issue that we support. So how could you explain voting yes, you for something, and the person who's against it, you vote to put him in office? And that is what's keeping our community. The election we had last Tuesday set the minorities back 50 years. 50 years was set back due to the vote or the lack of voting that was we had on last Tuesday's election. So we have got to find a better way to educate our voters on why we are voting yes or no, and why we should or should not vote yes or no. And I think that would be the best start. We do a voters registration. If we vote 1,000 people and they don't know what they're voting for, it may do us more harm than it do good. But if we have 500 people who know what they're voting for and why they should vote, we would be better off, I think.
Dr. Brooks, here's what I would have a great program for you to do.
Okay.
I would love to see you with a microphone and a camera going out to people in the North Chicago community and just ask them this question. Say, well, you voted for the mayor? Say, yeah, I voted for the mayor. Why? And I'll bet you that 9 out of 10 of your answers is, he's a nice man, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's what they'll say. Because he's a good-looking man. He's a charming man. He'll shake your hand. He's a nice man. That's the reason. Do you know anything about his policies? What he's doing? What he's passing? Where he's going? Nope, I don't know anything. He's just a nice man. So they would better vote, or with the ignorance, they'll say, I'll vote for the nice man, because if I vote for a man who I don't know, I might not get a nice man, right? So something worse could happen to me. So at least now I'm okay. I don't want to, it's kind of like being the victim of the community, you know, like Denise talks about. Once you've been a victim so long, which is part of, I'm sure, a part of her book and what she teaches, people become a victim. Unfortunately, you get into the cycle of continuing to be the victim because you've been beaten down so much, right? And it's until you get people to empower you to step up and step out of that, you're going to continue to be the victim. So in North Chicago, the leaders now are representing the people, and the people are the victims of what the bad leadership is doing. And so now they've got those victims under their wing, and they've kept them down. They keep going back to the same people, even though they know that they're not being treated right. And the psychology of that and why people do that is part and part probably reading her book to figure out why, you know, but there's a lot mentally that goes on where people feel that need, like they have to go back to that, even though they know it's not good for them.
You know, I initially, when I started going to the city council, someone told me, I had people that watched the program. Why don't you lighten up on the mayor? What do you mean lighten up? I'm giving you facts. You think I'm not against the mayor. He's a brother. You know, but a brother, you know, has to, has to do the right thing also. Yeah, and maybe you're right. Maybe I might surprise you. Maybe I will do that just for the substantiate, you know, to just to what you're saying there. You know,
I don't think anybody.
Because I heard the same thing. He's a nice guy. You know.
I've asked people, what are the policies? What are you hoping to do? What's the projection for the future? I mean, your leaders are your vision of the future, right?
Okay.
What's going to happen in the next 4 years? What are you going to do for this community? When people say, I'm going to right the wrongs, I'm going to make everything right, I'm going to make this city run well, that's nothing, because that's just telling people what they want to hear. Tell me the facts, right? I mean, tell me what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, how are you going to hit the ground running, and we don't hear anything. It's
one other thing, Attorney O'Connor, recent weeks, I think it had passed, yeah, I think the councilman voted to give the mayor a $50,000 raise. Was it 50,000? 30,000.
30,000.
Why $30,000 raise? They said, well, he hasn't had a raise in 16 years. Well, we have mayors that are not even paid in certain villages. Some are part-time, you know. Here's Gurnee, mayor's part-time. And look, we're looking at compare Gurnee to North Chicago. But they passed it, so you need to raise. See, it didn't pass the first time, I think, and then he brought it up again the following week, and it passed.
Yeah, they brought it up when Alderman January, who
Correct.
was
That's right.
she was out because her parent had died.
And he voted in a tiebreaker.
He voted in a tiebreaker. He made sure that vote came up when she was gone.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what you're saying, and the people accept that. They don't even fathom that things could be different. In fact, they've never seen, like I said, they've never even seen difference. They don't even know it exists. Often they turn against the person who's telling them that it can be different. I've noticed that.
We're telling people countywide, I guess it's worldwide, Ralph, you make sure that people worldwide knows about this program because it's on Facebook, right?
Yeah, I speak about all of it.
It's
I'm
online.
not bashful. Yeah,
and they can go to drbrooks.tv. And they can get it in Japan, Australia, whatever, you know. drbrooks.tv, all the programs. And these are facts that we're presenting, the facts.
One more thing,
Okay.
I almost bet you that if you went out to neighbors your microphone and camera, you wouldn't find 10 people in North Chicago that know the vote took place that Kevin was just talking about.
Yeah, that's true.
They just don't know. And then,
But why? That's you know, but why they don't know?
that's the question. I wish
know,
I knew the
Because
answer.
politics doesn't affect them.
No, if it doesn't personally affect them, that
Well, that's what
They
you hear.
think.
Until politics affects you, you don't walk for cancer until you get cancer. So when politics affects you, then you start to vote.
What I'm wondering is because North Chicago is approximately 70% renter occupied. If they're homeowners, you know, you think they'd take more interest?
well, if you're a homeowner, you take more little pride in the community, and then if you're and you were saying the percentage of most of our property owners are absentee landlord. And for a person who's renting, say, well, it doesn't matter to me, I don't pay no taxes. But you pay taxes in the form of your rent. If this rent goes, if his taxes go up $400, your rent gonna go up $25.
Okay.
That's right.
So that,
One thing I'd like to get in before we close, women. You know, I'm always preaching about the, 19th? I say 19th Amendment, right? Let's say the 20th, but the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. Give the women the right to vote?
The right to vote.
Is it 19th or 20th?
I'm not sure. Is it the
19th.
You're going to put me on the spot again today?
Oh, my goodness.
I think it's the 20th.
20,
No, I think it's the
20th Amendment, you know, the right to vote. But actually, what about the equality women? How is that federally affected? What does that say?
You mean the Equal Rights Amendment?
Yeah.
The Equal Rights Amendment was never ratified. My daughter, she often talked about that, educating me about the issue as it relates to the military, women not being able to fight front line, the infantry. You know, we are for some reason not up to par as men, I guess. But there were a lot of female military service people who argued against that, and I believe they won their right to be frontline in the infantry. So what the excuse is going to be now, I don't know. I personally like to just think that we all have what's called human rights. I really try to stay away from the women's rights issues, all the issues that divide us, and start to chip away at our humanity. I like to transcend race, gender, class, religious orientation, sexual orientation. I like to, you know, see past that, work with people without having that as an issue for me personally. I would like our justice system to also transcend race, gender, class, and all of those other factors that cause people to discriminate, because the racism and prejudice and discrimination is all about having power over someone else.
Power.
And so if we can empower each other, then I think we're going to lift humanity rather than trying to destroy.
But what about the George Wallace philosophy? Segregation yesterday, segregation today, segregation forever. Now that's passed right on down the line, right? So if that's passed down to how you going? And also, one other thing, when Adam ate the fruit, right? Now that poisoned our system, and all we can do is pray. That's all we can do is pray to God, because our system is just sinful, and man automatically going to sin. It's nothing you can do. People think they can work their way to heaven, but you know, I've never seen a Brinks truck behind a hearse yet, right? And you can do anything you want to do, but you are sinful, and you're going to do sinful things. There's just nothing that you can do. So you have to go way back to Adam. When you see him at the Golden Gate one of these days, Adam, why did you eat that fruit? Well, a woman.
Always blaming the woman. Victim blame, victim blame, victim blame. That's why we have no rights. Because you ate the apple.
It's still still have it.
There's a misconception to men in control always want to feel that they are stronger than a
Superior.
woman.
Okay.
The
And
power.
that's a misconception. Men are no stronger than women.
They're not.
Okay.
Men are more foolish than women. And I got a wife that's got a powerful left hook on the right, because she could actually whoop Joe Louis. But I know when I get home, I'll probably get a whooping. But that's it. And it's come way, women will stick together better than men. That's why they don't want women to come together in groups, because if women make up their mind they're going to do something, it's going to happen. Now, nothing's going to happen on none of these racial problems that we're talking about until women speak up. When the women come together,
Sojourner Truth.
the change, the
Mark her
change is
words.
going to come.
Name some more. What's the name? I know of a name. She, a white female, started what is now known as the NAACP, the National Association
Absolutely.
for the Advancement of Colored People.
Yeah,
And I knew, I know a name, and I just can't find. But go online, NAACP, and you'll see. White.
Mary Overton White.
All right,
Mary Overton White.
87 years old.
A white woman's last name White, and you couldn't remember that.
Well, during this time, he's got an mentioned white woman.
See what happened? The three things happen when you lose when you get as old as I am, and the three things get away from you. The first thing to go with the memory. I don't remember the other two. Thank you, Ralph Peterson, Jr. I know your father very well since I first came up here in, oh my goodness, 1957. Great person, great person.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Denise.
Thank you,
Rothmeyer,
Dr.
right?
Brooks. Yes.
All right. You've been a great recommendation from Ralph.
Yes.
And although we didn't meet years ago, but now you're going to be a regular on this program.
Amen.
Is that right, Ralph?
Oh yeah, she's sharp. I told you.
Beautiful child.
She's sharp.
Preacher, you're going to be first next time.
Okay.
We're going to do it like they said in Africa to do. We're going to do it. Thank you very much, Attorney O'Connor.
Thank you for
Great
having me.
resource person. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Community Forum. My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks, Sr., your host. Thank you, Lord Gully, WAUKEGAN, for continually watching this show.